Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Melissa Martell. First, I have just a couple of announcements. If you have a business you want to advertise with us, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. We do have unbeatable pricing, ad packages, and we reach a huge audience. Check out our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. That's also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. You're going to find awesome podcasts from our community. We're always available on Rokfin, Odysee, Rumble, all podcast platforms, and Rokfin is where you get our premium content. And all the premium content from every creator there on Rokfin. You just go to rokfin.com/FKN Plus or click the link in the description to sign up. You can also create a free account, get tons of free content, as well as all our regular shows for free. Today I want to welcome Melissa Martell. She has been a lover of history and folklore her entire life. She was born in a haunted hospital, then lived in a haunted house, as well as attended a reportedly haunted school as a youngster. This led to a natural curiosity about all things on the dark side of folklore. She attended college in Victoria, BC, studying history and psychology. However, she would regularly be researching the ghostly and occult history of the city, rather than her required classes. In 2016, she started behind the scenes designing e-zines, websites, and founding the Folklore podcast with author Mark Norman. She then branched out on her own with esoteric studies on the Secret Door podcast, and then began researching cults on Deprogrammed podcast. Melissa, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, it's great to finally get you on. This is long overdue, like we were just talking about, but you're here now. It's great. I love your podcast, and you explore some of my favorite things, folklore, esoterica, and even cults. There's a lot of fun rabbit holes we could jump into today, and I'm sure we will. This is your first time on, though. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what led you down your path and all the different podcasts you were doing.
Well, it's sort of been a mishmash of things over the years, sort of finding what works. I started off in graphic design and behind the scenes on the Folklore podcast, ironically, and I wasn't doing any podcasting. And then after I left that, I got into more paranormal, and I'd always wanted to focus just on folklore, but it sort of had its own path that it went on. So it went from that. I had a really good podcast called The Secret Door, but then I got into talking about cults, which is still an interesting thing. We can talk about that still in this show rather than just folklore, but because it's fascinating, because it's so abundant on the internet.
Talk about that. Sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that sort of, I've had a myriad of different hosts and whatnot, and we've just decided to go into folklore because my friend Letitia is into folklore and I was, and we always wanted to do a show together. So we started Folklore Dark. Mostly we're looking at a lot of storytelling traditions, but there's so many other areas of folklore that you can cover, like, garments, religious practices, games, etc. But we focus mainly on stories and books and oral tales and stuff like that. Awesome. But it's been about 5 years of podcasting to come to this point.
Yeah, that's almost like me. I've been doing this about 6 years, and that's great. You've been doing this for a long time and covering a lot of cool stuff. Now, I want you to tell us about your haunted childhood. You've had some pretty haunted experiences, huh?
Well, yeah, and it's part of it's probably part of the culture too, where I grew up. I was born on the east coast of Canada. And so there was always the stories of like that even the hospital that I was born in was haunted. And so you'd hear all these tales, and I never, I was really young. So you just go with the flow with what your culture tells you. But we moved into this house. I think would have been in 83. And we started having paranormal experiences there, which, I don't know. I won't say where it is because currently there's people who live in there. I'll, respect their privacy because I don't think they experienced anything, but we had all sorts of, it was an old Victorian and we had all sorts of like footsteps and lights going on and, people sighting something up in the room, like a man. And it just was a myriad. And we didn't live there for long, like maybe 4 or 5 months before we moved out. And weekly there was things that was going on at least once a week. So something would happen to somebody. Now, I guess logically I'd say, well, it could be logically explained, but there were some things like you would be sitting downstairs and you would start to hear, we thought it was a man walking upstairs. You would hear it loud and clear. And we would just be like, okay, that's the ghost. All right. We just sort of accepted it.
What is it about old Victorian houses? We live in one that was built in like 1893, and we hear footsteps upstairs all the time. Nothing really nefarious happens. We've had things move quite often, even pictures that are so high up on the wall that will be like tilted and impossible that a person got up there and did that. And it'll just be like the next morning we'll wake up and picture will be tilted, and the night before we'll hear footsteps, like loud footsteps upstairs, go upstairs, peek around, and nothing's there. So that's pretty crazy.
It is. And I don't know if it's just like some people, I know the logical people are probably going to say like, oh, it's creaking floors, it's an old building, but no, this was distinct, like somebody walking. It wasn't creaking. It was distinctive footsteps, so I don't buy that one on this, but I don't know, maybe it's some kind of thing we have in the culture and we're projecting out, and I have no idea, or it's a motive that happens probably throughout different cultures too.
Right.
It could be that whatever was there, that's what they did. It was a repeated pattern. Who knows?
Yeah, I often wonder a lot about whether it's, just something residual, the energy there that may just kind of be repeating like you just said, or actually something of intelligence or current consciousness that communicate. We have yet to have any communication, but the picture moving thing is pretty, it's annoying, really, because, it looks nice, and then we wake up in the morning and there's, I don't know if they're just screwing with us, but, that aspect. Now, you also went to a haunted school?
Well, yeah. And it was, this is going to blow your head off. It was across the street from the house. Like I'd walk down the road and go to the school. And I was only there for a short time. I never had any experience there, but there was tales, the folklore tales. And it was the tale of a little girl who haunted the school. And the story was that, and I have never been able to confirm this, I've never found any proof in the records of this at all, but there used to be this old chocolate factory that was on the site called Dorothy's Chocolates. Whether it's true or not, I cannot confirm that. This could all just be folklore. And a little girl got killed or some accident, it's following those tropes. And now on that place where the school is, people have spotted a little girl wandering through the halls that kind of disappears. So I got told that story about this school I was going to, and I thought, oh my God. And I was 6 years old, and I thought, I do not want to see this little girl. Because in my mind, I had like some kid mangled by some chocolate factory, like Willy Wonka gone bad or something, And, but yeah, that was the story about that school. And it was literally down the street and across the way. Right from the house I lived in.
Yeah. Wow, that must have been nice just to be able to get up and walk to school like that. Now, over the past, even in the past few years, we've had a massive amount of information that's come out about our own history, about the false nature of it, about the inaccuracies, and this has been going on since the beginning of written history, where the victors write the history or rewrite it, and there's things lost. There's things lost in translation. We've had cataclysms that have knocked out a huge portion of our ancient wisdom. So when we look at ancient folklore, there's so much of it that it's so fascinating, we think that it's just cautionary tales or things that we have told along the years that have been changed or kind of morphed into scary tales about vampires or ghosts or even fairies and aliens. But it makes me wonder how much truth to some of this stuff is, because we've learned that there's a lot more truth to some of the more fantastical stuff we know about our history than we've been led to know. So even the folklore, I'm wondering, how much do you think is truth about some of these paranormal, especially tales?
Well, that's kind of the point of folklore, is to dig back and get to the root of the story. And that's a really difficult thing to do. So, like, you can go look at something like Slender Man on the internet and you can trace it back easy because it's just happened. It's a myth that's been created and you can trace it back. But when you're looking at something like that haunted school, for instance, it's really hard to say whether or not it happened. Because, I mean, first off, in 1877, there was a massive fire in that city that burned all the records down. Things happen, like you said, disasters. I always think there's an element of truth to all the stories. And, it's kind of like a game of telephone, where it passes down. So it's definitely, most folklore is distorted. And, but there is definitely an element of truth. What level? I mean, I can't obviously give you an amount, but I think there is definitely a kernel of truth in almost every story that we have. Whether it's to warn you or something, whether it's an actual event. But that's why I like the folklore of like the people rather than say some kind of government thing, because I think people, they have less of a propaganda. I'm not saying they don't, but like when you go and look at propaganda, let's say, I mean, it's out there even today, and it doesn't matter what political site you're on. I mean, who knows? Like, that's not just handing down a story to hand information. That's purposely designing things to manipulate people and get a certain outcome. So, like, I like folklore because I really do think there's more honest kernel of truth to any kind of tale, and it gets lost because of orality. It's like not mostly in our history, most of folklore is of the people and it's handed down orally. It's not necessarily written down. So that's where things, where you get the changes, because like I said, it's like a game of telephone. Whereas like propaganda is real. Yeah. It's really deliberately done. I mean, you go back to the Plantagenets versus the Tudors and you see how they manipulated after Richard III died. I mean, they repainted his paintings to make him look monstrous. It was like intentional. That stuff still happens today, and but the story, it's interesting. How much of it's true, like I said, I can't say, but I think there's always kernels of truth. And that's like I said, the purpose of folklore is to kind of dive into that and try to get to a point of where the stories originated from.
Yeah, and then when you say propaganda is prevalent today, you said more than a mouthful there. That's a whole other show that we we would have to get into there for sure. One of my favorite areas of folklore that kind of majorly crosses over today into paranormal and ufology realms is the folklore of fairies and fae folk, and some of the tales that surround that, with abductions and people being taken for days and seemingly time alters and changes. And then they have the tales of changelings where people's children are taken, or they're actually taken and strange experiments are done on them. This is all kind of like crossovers to ufology in ways to me. What are some of your favorite aspects of like fairy folklore?
Well, when you talk about the changeling, I did a show on that long time ago, and funny, our show coming out that I'm putting out today is Dean Bertram came on and he talked about UFO folklore. So we have one coming out on that. Right. But the idea of the changeling is really fascinating, is that the fairy has stolen your baby, your human baby, and replaced it with a fairy baby. And could it be true? It could be, but it's also, when you look back in time, in medieval times, like, let's take UFOs out of this, it was also a way of explaining problems and medical problems that showed up with the baby. So say the baby started having some kind of disability that we would have diagnosed today. We'd say maybe they have Down syndrome, maybe they have some kind of medical issue that we understand. in 800 years ago, the explanation was the fairies must have come
Right,
and switched the baby up. So there's that element to it as well.
That's kind of awful.
It is, but that's how they would explain it. I mean,
right.
That's how they dealt with it in those times, to make it like, okay, our baby is gone and this is a fairy baby. And so there's that element to that. And I think the UFO abduction, there's similarities, but I don't think it's the same. Like the same thing's not happening where we're like, oh yeah, we just abducted the kid and switched it out. I think I think a lot of people are having an experience, and whether or not it's real to them, and it's important to listen to, because I think there's something definitely going on there. I don't know if it's the same as a changeling experience, where they swap it out, but maybe the adult tales of being abducted by a fairy are similar. Like back in the day. I think those two are probably similar, but I was always interested in the changeling element of it, because it's kind of creepy, having your kid creepy. Abducted. And it speaks to our terror. Like, I'm a mom and my son's grown now, 16, 17, but it's terrifying if you're out somewhere and you've got your kid 4 years old and you turn around and they're missing. It's a horrifying experience. So I think it speaks to our terror of our children going missing as well.
Yeah, I want to get into the kind of missing 411 aspect, the things that could lurk in the woods for sure. One more thing I want to kind of touch on about fairies. I had Joshua Cutchin on a couple of times, and he talks about the fairy blast, where somehow these things would either blow on you or blast you with something, and you'd have little pieces of material that kind of become lodged inside yourself or under the skin, or can be like excreted, and that kind of makes me think of a little bit of a crossover with UFOs, where people are getting things like implants and things removed, but it's still it's creepy and interesting as well.
Or like you see those movies where there's some kind of creepy alien pod thing and it sucks on your face, or the body's being invaded by something and you have no control over yourself now. Yes, that kind of element is pretty creepy. Yeah, and so Joshua referenced that in fairy lore as well.
Yes, he's called it a fairy blast.
A fairy blast.
Yeah.
Well, I think it could be real, but everything always references our terror of things being in our body. I mean, perhaps, and I don't know, this is just me off the cuff thinking about this, that I mean, you can have parasites or different things invading your body. So, maybe it's an explanation back then.
Could have been, yeah. Then there's so many crossovers that kind of touches on. Fairies have crossovers to other kind of creatures and beings that could live in the woods and kidnap children and prey off of your fears and all these things. We hear of Bigfoot, we hear of dogmen, mothmen, and other type of strange creatures. Like one more recently is the rake. Have you heard of the rake? This guy's looks creepy. I think a lot of the video is fake, but I don't know if most of the videos
what
are
is
fake.
He doing?
It is
some
like
kind of animalistic.
It looks kind of like a ball, completely bald, very stick-like creature with very long arms, longer arms than legs, that kind of crawl along, and he's got a kind of like a gray alien type of face with very little features, just big black eyes, and it's hard to tell if some of these videos are fake. And that's the problem with like YouTube videos and things that we're looking at that are trying to show us paranormal videos or ghosts or creatures. We don't know it's fake these days, and so there's so many good special effects that are being done. So watching videos and stuff is a really hard way to kind of gather any type of proof or anything. Are you at a crossroads in life with unanswered questions? How does your past connect to your present life? October Hallam can help you discover how your past connects to your present and is shaping your future. October is an intuitive, healer, empath, and medium with over 20 years of experience helping people navigate through some of life's greatest challenges. A recent client from Egypt says, October is pure magic, We keep coming back for more and recommended her to our closest friends. If you would like to book a session with October, please contact her at theancientgift222@gmail.com.
Well, it is. And it's like, I think that phenomena is something else. That's like a cultural editing, sharing of media. That's something totally different than an actual experience in paranormal.
Yeah,
because
they've muddied the waters, though. That's what that's what's not good about it.
But like, I've had a couple of paranormal experiences, and they're very short and fleeting, and they're there for a second, and then they're gone. And there's no video, there's no video footage of it, and most of the stuff you're going to see is edited stuff, because there's no way, I think, that you could probably capture this stuff on video. It's so fleeting and quick, and whether it's connected with your psychology or it's really there, or I don't know.
I was just about to say, it's rather personal too, isn't it? With like, you don't see many large groups of people being able to experience something together. It's more.
There's some multiple witnesses, but a lot of stuff is very personal. Yeah.
That's another
very
interesting aspect.
And like, who's going to be standing there and it happens and you get your camera out? No, that's not life. Well, maybe for some people it is, if they're in a fight at, McDonald's and they want to film it. But if you're having a paranormal experience, like I said, it's so subtle, and it's not even like, it's not like it's Ghostbusters where, everything's, it's such a subtle experience that it's more about, the psychology and the physiology or things that you feel. I just had a strange experience, being at a client's house that I thought was really interesting, because the person's husband just passed away. And I won't go into detail because it's private information with the client, but it literally happened in about a few seconds. And I thought, oh geez, maybe the husband's still around. And I'm at work, and it was like, oh, well, that was weird. Wow. It happened like when you're not expecting it, you're working, like things happen. So how can I possibly record that?
Right. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You can't. Some of those experiences impossible to be documented. One of the things you sent in a previous email that I'm really excited to talk about, because it's happened to me, is sleep paralysis. It used to happen to me all the time, especially in my early 30s. Whenever I was like going through a bad relationship, I wasn't in a good place in my life. This is before I even started any of this stuff. This was like around 2010 to 2012. I would have constant sleep paralysis. I would kind of wake up and be stuck. I couldn't move, and I'd hear these loud banging noises, like someone was banging on my ceiling, and I couldn't do anything about it. And then I'd start to see people walk by my bed, and shadows kind of just walk all around me, and I just couldn't move until I was allowed to move. And then when I'd get up, everything was normal again. No banging, no shadows. But it was the strangest thing, and it happened to me for like 3 years straight. And, once I got into a better place in my life, it never happened again. But it was very fascinating. I want to get your take on sleep paralysis.
Well, we are going to be doing a show on the Newfoundland hag pretty soon. And it's obviously, there's a huge element of psychology to it. And maybe that wasn't understood always in the past, but it's created this folklore of like, it's interesting that people have different figures that visit them. It's not always an old hag or a shadow person. Like, I've had an experience where I've talked about it briefly on our podcast, where I was doing the show. We were doing a show called Drawing Out the Spirits, where I would talk about stuff and the co-host would draw, because he's an artist. And we drew this cat figure. He drew this cat figure, because we were talking about some folklore about this it was a ghost story where this mutilated cat would show up as like a forerunner, which is my favorite type of folklore. It's like a ghostly thing that shows up and it warns you of death coming in the family. Yeah. And we were talking about this story, and he drew a picture of it, and we decided to kind of do this almost like a Philip experiment, where you try to recreate this cat picture we drew up. We were testing. It was like our scientific testing. And so he started doing all this visualization of this cat figure, seeing if he could manifest it. And I was really busy working, so I was not the one focusing on it as much as he was. And one day I actually had a sleep paralysis experience, and it wasn't a cat that came in. It wasn't a hag. It wasn't a shadow person. It was like this creamy white outline of a being. And I was in bed sleeping, and I knew it was walking down my hallway and into my living room, and it came in my room, and it literally crawled on top of me and started trying to push me down. And I was like, wow, what the heck? And when I told it to get off, it hissed and whispered, no, like in my face. And I don't know what it was going to do next, because I kind of stopped fighting. And the minute I stopped pushing against it, well, whatever, it dissipated. So it's connected to me somehow, but it was really strange. But it wasn't like, I find it interesting that throughout history, yeah, the old hag is there. And you have like a whole town in Newfoundland that's experiencing. You have villages in Africa that experiences these demons, and they all believe in it. And it seems to be hooked up to your psychology or something happening, but it's almost like you're manifesting something like a tulpa, like something that actually physically almost exists. I don't know if that's true, but it feels very real. But no one else can see it. But there has been. Yeah, but there has been people who have had sleep paralysis, and they weren't the only one that witnessed their experience. Other people in their house have seen it. They've seen it in the house, or they've experienced stuff as well. So there's been those reports where it's not just them. They'll have a roommate, and the roommate's like, dude, I seen some hag in the hallway or something like that. So that happens where multiple people experience these, sleep paralysis. And yeah, it probably can be explained psychologically, but they don't really know how to stop it, and could it be linked to emotional trauma? Yeah, it could be linked to emotional trauma and things in you. But I've also heard of people doing like ritual experiences and trying to almost like a shamanic experience, trying to pull this entity off of them. And they said it felt like they were pulling something out of them. So, you could even think it was some kind of form of possession. There's all sorts of theories on it where it goes. And it's so fascinating because it's not just one figure. It changes, it mutates. It's everyone's having it, but there's the similar features. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just in our mind. I can't say that 100% definitively. I think there's a whole bunch of different reasons.
I think there's something huge to sleeping in general, and the states of sleep, and the actual traveling of our consciousness through astral realms, through different realms. I think that is something that we're probably doing when we're sleeping, is we're connecting to possible different realities. I couldn't tell you for sure, but I've had plenty of very parallel dream experiences to reality where I will, I'll have a dream that I'll do something or find something that I've been looking for in real life, and then I'll find it in my dream, and it'll be at the exact place that I found it in my dream in real life. And there's so many strange parallels that have happened just from dreaming. I think that this is connected more to reality than we think, and maybe not the reality that we see through in this visual spectrum. I think that there's plenty of different layers of reality beyond the spectrum of our vision that maybe we can access when we sleep. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's quite possible. I don't know what that is, and I don't know if we can test that, but there's obviously things we can't perceive. And there's this idea, like you see all those fake psychics and people who are like, oh, I'm going to predict your future, and it looks hokey. And again, it's like the people who make up fake ghost stuff. It kind of ruins it, because I believe we are connected and we do pick up on things, but it's not like, oh, Esmeralda with her, glass ball, crystal ball, and she can know the future. It's just, we're all on this planet, and there's like this sort of field that connects us. I don't know what you want to call it, but I do believe we are connected, and we can pick up on certain things or subliminal things that are happening even between us. So why not? We're able to perceive something else that's not human. I don't know. It could do.
Yeah.
That's there, and that we're like, we don't know what it is because we can't see it in this, 3-dimensional space.
Yeah, I think there's so much more just beyond the spectrum of our vision that's all around us at all times. You mentioned something I want to talk about, harbingers. like entities that show up that are kind of like harbingers of doom, or messengers of death, or messengers of something that is about to happen to, that's not too good. Let's talk a little bit about those. What are some experiences that you've heard of, some most profound ones?
So on the east coast of Canada, where I come from, they called it a forerunner. And it was obviously some kind of, it could be knocking, it could be a ghostly figure that was, showing up, and it's telling you usually that someone in the family is going to pass on. And the one that I heard it was in my family. And my grandmother, who's passed on since she was a young girl, and her mother had died when she was really young. She was kind of half raised by her father, half in orphanages, and half lived with this aunt of hers, aunt. And the aunt was like, from the Victorian area, mediumship, believed in, spiritualism, and would tell her how to read tarot cards and tell her a lot of this stuff. And one day she was visiting this aunt, and in those days, most people didn't drive. Remember, no one had a license. A lot of people didn't have licenses or cars. They may even still used, horses, even in some of these small little villages. And it would have been in the 40s, early 50s. And her father, he worked odd jobs all the time, and he was supposed to be in this other end of town. And she looked out, and she could see her father walking down the street, and he was coming up the walkway to her aunt's house. And she was like, "Oh, that's really weird. What is my father doing? Walking up to the house." And her aunt's like, "Well, go get the door, let him in." And she heard him walk up onto the steps or whatever to come in. And she went to go get the door to let him in, and there was nobody there. And she was like, "What is going on?" And her aunt immediately said, "This is bad news. This is a forerunner. Something bad is going to happen."
Wow.
And I think it was about, I can't remember the exact time. I've written about this, so I have the exact time in writing, but I don't think it was too much longer, where maybe a week. It wasn't very much time in between. Her father was out with the horse, and he was trying to feed it. He'd come home from the pub. He had a few drinks, and he went out with the horse, and the mare swung her head, and she struck him, and he fell down, and he thought he was okay. And he just went about his business. And I think within the next day, he was in the hospital with a brain bleed, and he died. And they believe that his own self showed up to say, "Hey, I'm not going to be here much longer," a forerunner. And that's what they always called it in my family. And my grandmother swore on that story that he came up. She saw him, he came up, and then he wasn't there. And she was pretty no nonsense, worked in hospitals all her life, but she swore on that story over and over again, that she was sure that she was told that given a sort of a warning that her dad was going to die, but she didn't know who it was going to be. But it turned out to be her own father. And then he did die in the hospital.
That's one of the creepiest phenomenon as when it comes to crazy paranormal stuff. To me, is like doppelgangers. Seeing someone like your own self, or someone that's a double, that's not real. That's very creepy, and that doesn't seem to be like a good sign for people either.
No, and of course the Irish have the banshee, and they've got like the black dog that will come, or they even have a hag that will show up with a dog. They've got all these folklore mythologies of things that are coming to warn a family. Like that cat story we had. That cat, it was a mutilated cat that was supposed to have been mutilated like way back when. It was a ghostly cat, and it would always show up to tell the family someone was about to die. So her story was different because it's his own, it's like you said, it's his own doppelganger, which is kind of, it's like, did he know? Who knows? I don't know. Like, it is creepy.
It's definitely creepy. Now, I want to definitely get into cults, because that's another fun topic. But before we do that, I want to hit the not only 411 missing 411 aspect, but some of the cryptids and other creatures that are kind of lurking in the woods that may possibly be responsible for humans disappearing. Maybe not. Maybe it's something else we don't understand, or maybe it's just human stupidity. I don't know, but there's a lot of high strangeness that is surrounded with all those missing 411 cases and people just disappearing out of nowhere, and then some ending up miles from where they've lost. I mean, we know these crazy stories. First, let's start with the possibilities of Bigfoot. I used to never do shows about Bigfoot. Like, it was kind of funny to me when I first started doing this. But the more I started looking into it, it became very real to me. I've talked to so many very respectable researchers and gentlemen and women that are looking into this very seriously and have come up with very profound information that that points to this as a real phenomenon. Not only that, it's highly strange and unexplained when it comes to some of the aspects like disappearing Bigfoot going into portals, Bigfoot holding orbs, Bigfoot with a UFO near it, Bigfoot associated with other paranormal high strangeness, psychic Bigfoot. I mean, all these things that are like, is this really just some lost hominid, or is this something much more than we would ever understand?
I think it's like, I've never seen Bigfoot, and I'll be honest, I've never had a UFO experience or abduction or anything like that. So I don't want to, I don't think people who have them are necessarily lying or wrong, but I think it's sort of like a lot of folklore where there's a root to something. There's probably something very real out there, that may be misconstrued. But I think the more elaborate it gets, the harder it is for me to believe it. Like when it's at a portal and it's talking to a dog man and having a coffee, or like
that's a party right there. Elaborate. Come on.
Yeah, I know. It starts getting so elaborate that I'm like, my skeptical side comes in and goes, okay, well, I don't know. I don't even know what to do with that, because like if I'm looking at folklore, you'd want to go back to like native tales. Like, what did they think was happening with Bigfoot? What were they experiencing? Because I think that's more interesting than some of the elaborate stuff. Because, people tell stuff to get attention. And yeah, there are people who might say it had real experiences and be really honest. Like, I swear to God, but there are people who do tell things for attention, and it's nothing more. But that's why I think some of the native stories are really fascinating, because I think they're obviously experiencing something that really is out there, and maybe there is something still to be found out there that we don't know of.
Yeah.
Interdimensional, I don't know. Is it possible? It is. I mean, we were just talking about shadow people, so and sleep paralysis, so maybe it's something similar, but you're just not sleeping. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what about areas of high energy, high strangeness, like concentrated energy that people are constantly experiencing paranormal activity? Of course, you hear about the famous Skinwalker Ranch, but there's other places all around the world that have like these concentrations of not only just paranormal activity, but other just high strangeness that seems to occur congruently with everything else, like a Bigfoot, a UFO, a ghost. They have Skinwalker Ranch. There's a new place called the Meadow. They have the Blind Frog Ranch. You can even look at places like Mount Shasta, Sedona, Arizona, places of just like a different type of energetic experience than other places. What do you think about that? Do you think it's just maybe something electromagnetically affecting that area? A lot of people think there's something underground. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you know what? There is definitely something to some, natural energies affecting us. I mean, we know that, like, you can actually have paranormal experiences from certain frequencies in the room. Like, from sound vibrations, it can make you feel like you're having paranormal experiences. I don't think that's always why people are having paranormal experiences. So that's certainly something. But I think it's also, there could be some raw truth, and then I think mythology gets created up in this, and so there's the truth of the root experiences, then there's a mixture of mythology, and there could be environmental factors going on there. I also think that you need to be aware of people who are involved, like how much money are they making. Like there's money, there's politics, all that stuff's involved, and when you've got humans, you kind of got to look at everything. But I don't doubt that there's root experiences going on. somewhere. Are they as elaborate? I can't say. I mean, I've never been to Skinwalker Ranch, so I can't actually personally say yay or nay. I have, but if someone says a werewolf came out of a vortex and was smoking a cigar, I'm going to be a little more skeptical. Yeah. As if they said, I was at Skinwalker Ranch and, it was really weird. I just had this really subtle, like this experience, and it seems a little bit more personable or like, but when it feels like a comic book, that's when I'm like, I can't help it that my skeptical side is there.
Now,
because there's too many things that influences that in our media.
There is. Do you know Ryan Burns? He is a researcher out in the Uintah area, and he's a really good friend of mine, and I do trust pretty much every experience that he said he's had over there. Mm-hmm. And most of them are kind of subtle, just like, like you were just talking about personal experience, hearing voices in the sky, little lights following you around. But there have been a couple that have been incredible that I don't think he's doing this just to get attention or lie about it.
Right.
For example, he said that he saw a very strange looking coyote just kind of walk up, and there was something wrong with it. It didn't look right. And all of a sudden, it dissolved into dust and just was gone. And things like really that is, wow, if things like that are really occurring, that's fantastic. Fascinating.
That actually sounds like an acid experience I had when I was 18.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have had
I'm not doubting that he saw that. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. He has to, that's his experience. I'm not even gonna. I have no idea. I mean, I don't doubt that he experienced that at all.
Yeah, there's.
But as to what it is, who knows, or why it is? Is it a real coyote? Is it from another dimension? That's sort of the mystery of the paranormal.
Well, we also have the aspect of people, like I said earlier, muddying the waters, coming in here to intentionally spread BS and to intentionally get people to think that this is all fake, that this isn't real. And we have some people in high levels coming in to do that. I know especially in the UFO community, there's infiltrators there. Not so much, I don't think, in the paranormal field. Maybe there is, I think that's mostly just kind of being pushed to the more woo-woo side, especially being portrayed in Hollywood and media the way it has been for the past few years. They don't seem to be focusing too much on paranormal. They seem to be shifting to like UFOs and aliens, that they're a threat and we need to watch out for them for some strange reason. But I don't know what I think that the answer is that the UFO phenomenon is probably more of a paranormal, spiritual, metaphysical thing than they want to admit. So that's probably why they're pushing it to the more nuts and bolts physical threat type thing. That's just my personal opinion. But go ahead.
No, I was gonna say there's definitely other life out there. I mean, we're not the only ones. Whether or not they're visiting us is the debate. And when they start saying they're a threat in military, you got to think, okay, what kind of financing do these people want? That's what I always think. It's like, okay, we're jumping the gun here because you don't even have them there. You can't even produce them to say they're there. And now you want all this, you're saying they're a threat to humanity and we can't even see them. And I know it depends. Like I said, it depends who's saying it and what their intent is, because I think like you said, it's muddying the water, because I know people who have really had genuine experiences and they don't even want to talk about it because it's so traumatic to them.
Yeah, and there's some people that just want attention, that are just trying to make up stories, or they have had an experience and maybe it was subtle, just like we're talking about earlier, so they have to embellish. So there's a lot of things that we have to, I think using our intuition is one of the strongest things we can do when looking at all this stuff.
Remember, a lot of this stuff that people are looking at, like if you're looking at the History Channel or the Travel Channel, I had an ex-partner who used to work in documentaries, and he wanted to do a documentary on the paranormal and get funding for it. He was filming something in Catalina for, I think it was HBO or something like that. And he was inquiring about funding to do something on the paranormal. And their response was, well, can you make a ghost manifest? And he's like, well, that's not the point. It's like, the point is to talk about these theories and stuff. And they're like, no, we'll fund something if you can guarantee a ghost will manifest. So that tells you, when it comes to a lot of these documentaries, a lot of these shows, it's entertainment. basically. So you kind of got to sort people's real experiences out from entertainment, because they want something to happen so people can watch. That's their objective. So that's what they're about. And same with UFO stuff on TV. They want people to watch. That's their objective. So you kind of got to start sorting out that from people's real experiences. And that's why I like with Folklore Dark, I like to look at these old stories where people weren't trying to get attention necessarily. They honestly believe something happened to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we have to get into the occult, and which leads us to talking about cults. I know you've done some research into this, and this is a fascinating topic. When it comes to the occult, that's where a lot of people check out when they're doing deep dives into why some of the things in reality happen. Maybe they're not a spiritual person, maybe they don't believe in paranormal or the occult, and they hit something where that elite factions are at a satanic ritual, and they're performing all these strange things, and they believe in this, and politicians believe, and they're like, no, I'm checking out, I'm not going there. So they're missing out on like a huge portion of what is really going on behind the scenes, whether you believe it or not. A lot of these people believe in the occult. A lot of the people that are in high places of power practice the occult and ritual magic and all these things. And ritual magic for me, magic in general to me is a part of our existence. It's just like you said, it's an unseen energy that can be manipulated. It's neither good nor bad, but people can use it just like a gun, just like a tool, for good or for bad. And I think that is what we're seeing, and we've been seeing on a large scale when it comes to our manipulation of our consciousness and the direction that we're trying to be steered. And basically mass mind control and all these things have been kind of applied to humanity. And it also goes on individual and smaller scales into cults that people will, join for whatever reason, for something that they're looking for in their life, it's something that they feel missing, and this cult provides that for them, that answer, those one beautiful answers for reality that they've been looking for. And a cult can be so many different things. We have a medical cult right now, people that are blindly believing in ridiculous medicine. We have a political cult. We have an education. There's so many aspects of what a cult is and what it's become these days. So we live in very interesting times.
There's criteria for cult, and just remember, anything can become a cult. So, and any one of us can be indoctrinated into a cult at any time. And so one of the criteria but onto the occult, when we're talking about elites and stuff like that, intent's important. So if you're going to look at magic, like you said, your intention is always important with magic. So it's like, it's not like you said that is bad, because occult just means hidden, out of view kind of thing. Right. But it's your intent and why you're doing it and what you are kind of projecting on the world and your other fellow human beings. And there's a lot of people who have really bad intentions, and one of the biggest magic, of course, going out there is that brainwashing, marketing, propaganda. And in Bernays, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He kind of got that down to a T early on. But anything can become a cult, and there is criteria to it, but there's also God, we could go so many places with cults, because there are probably working things that you're involved in that you are not interacting with them in a very cult-like manner because you're on the outer peripheries of the group. But when you get into the inner people who are really involved, it starts looking more like a cult. So it's so complex because humans have the need to belong in a group, and we feel very vulnerable when we're not in a group. So it's almost our basic survival to be in a group, and cults really take advantage of that. And statistically, more women are likely to get involved into like your typical Jim Jones cult than men. Well, it's probably changing with the internet. And really all that needs to happen to get involved in a cult is usually it's somebody with low self-esteem and who are very vulnerable, and they're usually at a really bad time in their life, and they have very low self-esteem, and they're searching for an identity. It makes you a very dangerous and open person to, abusive relationships and cults.
Cults, they seem to have a very pyramid type of structure where there's always just this one person at the top that kind of formed everything, and then everyone else is following. Is that the case?
Yes. Yeah. Usually you have an enigmatic leader, and then he'll have his cronies. And that enigmatic leader, you take Jim Jones, for example, he's always going to have that sort of triad personality disorder. He'll have the Machiavellianism, the narcissism, and some psychopathy. That's a dangerous mix. It's like Adolf Hitler. It's like Mussolini, Stalin. They all have that mix. Jim Jones was like that too. In fact, Jim Jones copied a lot of Hitler in the way he spoke. I think he idolized him early on, but he was preaching to people who were very vulnerable, minorities, and presented it as love and light. And he had the most devious intentions underneath. And I don't even know if he fully knew. Right. I think he might have believed his BS at first. I don't even think he totally knew where it was going to end up. I think he just had that psychopathy naturally, and he just pushed into that direction the more that he gets people. But like the way that it's done, it's almost, it's like it never changes. It's done to that process almost every single cult. They start off with the compliments and approaching you, and it's almost like they know that you have low self-esteem, that they have a type of person that they know they can go for, and then it develops into complimenting you, trying to make you feel good, inviting you somewhere, and then when you get closer, they love bomb you. And this happens in abusive relationships too, and they love bomb you, so you feel like, wow, I finally feel so important. This is it. This is the one. This is my, twin flame. This is the group. This is the thing. And, maybe you've had low self-esteem, or you've come from an abusive background, or you might have even come from a family that was in religious cults to begin with. And so once they love bomb you, and what they do is they get you to associate that group with those good feelings. So you're not associating your own achievements, your own self with the good feelings. You're associating the group and the leader with that feel good. And it creates like this chemical, almost like addiction in your brain. And so when you get into that group, and then they'll say things like, now you have to give up all your stuff. Now you have to give up this, join us, we'll take care of you. And then once they got you in there and they've isolated you from everybody, that's when a lot of the mind control starts, which is basically abuse. And there's a myriad of mind control that I won't go into. And they do that. So they'll start abusing you with all that mind control. And then you'll be like, what? And then they'll pull you back in. They'll give you a little bit more of that love bombing to make you feel good. And then you're like, oh, I've got it back again. That's your hit. That's your high. And then they'll start abusing you again and pulling you out. It's like this trauma bonding process with cults. And a lot of times they'll introduce drugs and everything. And so by the time things are done, you're in Jonestown drinking Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
And it gets really messed up. And that's just a short version of it. We could go on and on and on, but they started that process to associate the group, the leader, and the cult with everything good in your life.
Yeah, and it seems that there are some, I don't want to say innocent cults, but some cults that aren't, going off some of the deep edges, and like some of the stuff you said, drinking Kool-Aid and getting people to have these radical ideals and even radical actions. There's some that I guess it's just, having a sense of belonging and, a sense of community with some of these people. And we see that a lot in, some of the, metaphysical stuff that's going on, some of the new age movement that we're seeing, even in the UFO community. There's not always innocent, because some of the information can be harmful coming out. It's some of it's ridiculous, like some of the secret space program stuff. Like they've got some cults in this community that that are probably just borderline, you shouldn't be there,
Yeah. Well, there is there are cults that are benign, that aren't as devious. And one of the things, if you can join a group freely and leave freely without being persecuted and attacked, Like that's what a cult will do. They'll go after you and they'll destroy your life. That's narcissism. When you leave, they may even try to hurt you or harm you. If you can come and go freely, then doesn't really have all the elements of a cult just because it's a group, but usually cults, the real bad ones, and the controlling ones, they will, number one, they don't want you to tell people what's really going on. They'll try to make it look like you're insane. Another element of cults is they'll collect information on you. Scientology does this. They collect all your private stuff. That's called, and they do this at a certain stage once you're in there and they trust you, and it's going to be part of the process of growing. You have to confess, you have to tell them, and they store all that information, not because they're trying to help you, but because they're going to use that against you if you ever try to fight back and say no, or say I'm going to leave. They're like, oh, but we have this little secret information here. So they'll use that stuff, and if you leave, they will destroy you, because you leaving, you're going to maybe take your money with you. You're going to tell other people. You're going to start speaking out. You have an independent mind. The leader loses control. So you must be destroyed. That's that narcissistic psychopathy.
Yeah.
In cults.
Scientology, you mentioned that. I'm glad you did. It's an obvious cult, but it's like one of the things that the cults that are like accepted in the mainstream, and it's cool because celebrities are joining it. But man, the things that when I hear some of the things going on, I'm sure there's so much more to it that are secret that you're not going to hear about, but it's so disturbing. It just seems like they're breeding like psychopaths to me. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. And when somebody like Tom Cruise can join that and not talk to his daughter because she's not part of it. I mean, I can't imagine not talking to my son because he's not a Scientologist. I can't imagine staying in a group or putting up with any abusive relationship that said, you can't talk to your son anymore because he's not a Scientologist, or I'm threatened by him, or I can't imagine doing that. So you have to be pretty brainwashed and crazy, in my opinion, to not talk to your own child because your cult, your religion forbids you to talk to outsiders. Yeah. That's a hallmark of any kind of cult, is that it's an us versus them, and they'll put that in fairly early, is that the other people outside are evil, they're doing bad, and we're the goodies. So it doesn't matter if you support Biden, you support Trump, you support Oprah Winfrey. If they're positing that there's goodies and baddies, you should be careful. Yeah, it's really devious, and it turns you against other people, and it makes you more attached to the group more than ever. You become so dependent on the group that you can't even dress yourself properly without the group. And that's the whole point of it, is that you'll never leave. And it's almost like they're sucking you dry. They're using up your energy. And by the time you leave, through all that abuse, you're going to be like a zombie shell of who the former person you were. It would take a lot of recovery. You'll never be the same.
That's crazy. Are there any aspects of cults, or any modern cults, or cults from our history that you've been personally looking into that you'd like to talk about a little bit?
Well, of course, all the woke stuff that's happening is insane. It's hard because you can't necessarily point to one leader, but I'm sure in smaller factions and groups and universities, you've got charismatic people running the show. And it does run like that, whereas if you don't believe the woke stuff anymore and you kind of speak out, you're, vilified. They'll either call you a racist, or they'll call you a whole bunch of stuff, whatever, to down you, just because you question their logic, or lack of logic, or lack of actual factual science. But the woke stuff, people were saying like QAnon was dangerous. Well, it is to a point, it is, but most people can leave QAnon and be fine. The woke stuff is devious because it's weaved right into all the schools now. It's in all the corporations, it's in everything. I find it more devious because I think it's having a long-term effect.
If you're not woke, you're going to go broke.
QAnon, yeah. If it's having more of a long-term effect than QAnon, and I think QAnon believes ridiculous stuff, but it's going to have more of a long-term effect because it's infiltrated in all of the faculties and the schools and everything now. And no one's just teaching math and English. They're teaching like the most absurd stuff. I won't get into. I mean, yes. I think we all know some of the crazy stuff they're teaching. Well, I find that one of the most disturbing that's happening right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've been subject to this massive I call them death cult. They've been slowly infiltrating everything. I believe, at least in modern times, they've probably been in control for a long time. But I think in modern times, after World War II, after Project Paperclip, after we started bringing all these crazy scumbags in, they started infiltrating everything in our country. Yeah. JFK was a next stepping stone for them to infiltrate even more. And then we have a series of staged events and horrifying, traumatic events to traumatize the masses, to get them to live in fear and follow the cult's agendas. But they had so much control, they were able to do it so well, and they have control of the media, which is like a huge, it's a tool for magic, for mass mind control and magic to keep us in a certain state of mind, right? So they have everything to do this massive global type of cult operation.
It's disturbing because people look at the news and they trust it. They think if you're Democratic, you're better. That, like, as if all politicians aren't being sneaky and devious and aren't money hungry and aren't, but they trust the news and they think that's factual. And then when you start actually looking at it, you realize that CNN lies all the time. So does Fox will lie. So does MSNBC. Like, they all lie. I'm in Canada. We have CBC. Most of their funding comes from the government. They lie for Trudeau all the time. They lied about the truckers and the protests. And that's why a lot of them had their accounts seized and stuff, because the news was just lying about what was happening. They lie for government propaganda. I almost can't even see the difference between, media and government anymore. It's like, right. It's like they're working on behalf of a politician when they shouldn't be. They should be neutral. And that's not happening anymore. And that's the problem with the media. It's shifted. It's changed since these moguls have run 24/7 news channels. And it's become speaking for a political party instead of, speaking factual stuff about every candidate, regardless of what side they're on.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm always interested to hear about how things are currently going in Canada. I have quite a few friends that live there, and when I talk to them, I like to get updates because it's been hard for you guys. It's been extremely hard. It's a lot different than here in the United States, and we take that for granted. We don't realize some of the hardships that you guys are going through because we've always thought of Canada as just like America Part 2. Your cool buddies up there, nice buddy Canadians. But the people in control there, the government, are just as nefarious as our government, and we don't ever think about that, but it affects you guys a lot more because you have these horrific type of agendas and things that are occurring that are for control purposes, but it's easier for them to get away with it there.
Yeah. Canadian politics took a very nefarious turn when Trudeau got into power. He is a narcissist. He's a smear campaigner. He's a liar. He is, he tries to pretend that Trump is someone bad. And I do think Trump's narcissistic, definitely. He's high on himself. But Trudeau does it in a different way. Trudeau does the woke stuff where he's like this, omnipotent. He's speaking all this nice. He's nicey nice. And he's not really like that. He's been caught in so many frauds. He's changed our government for the worse. And everyone keeps saying, well, they need to change the laws. They need to make them tighter. And I'm like, sure, they could. But, when you are dealing with somebody like that and people who are manipulating and people who have that, they'll always see loopholes. They'll always see ways to get around laws and corrupt the system for their own good. I don't know if it's factual that he's working for Klaus Schwab or who else he's working for, but he certainly isn't working for the Canadian people. And most Canadian people are just too daft to see it. I mean, he doesn't have a majority government. We're not a republic like the United States. We're just not. It's there's not fair and equal representation from every province in there. And we have this really big social system, and I don't have a problem with socialized stuff. You need some structure you need to have a safety net for people who are, going under hardships. I don't have a problem with that. But when that involves paying the media off to represent you and lie, I have a problem with that. And so there's some problems in the Canadian system that I think nobody saw coming because they didn't see some megalomaniac, narcissistic little rich boy getting into power. And that's what Trudeau is. He's privileged, he's not very well educated, and he just talks the good woke talk. And he's got a higher agenda, and I think he's got to be linked up to other people in power and the World Economic Forum and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And he's really destroyed. He thinks he's making Canada better, and I think he's destroyed Canada, because I think it was a much better country before he came into power.
Oh yeah, definitely, 100%. Do you think that the awakening that is going on across the planet right now? I mean, it's pretty inevitable that people are kind of snapping out of the zombification and spell that they've been under, and I think it's on a larger scale than we'll ever know, because the mass media doesn't want people to know that people are actually snapping out of it and going against us. So I think there's a majority on our side. I think there is a majority of people awakening. Yeah. Gives me hope that we can somehow rise up against this, or just be able to not participate enough in their corrupt systems to where it crumbles, and and it's able to start over. But do you have hope that that's going on in Canada too?
I do, in a way. It's whether or not it's sustainable, and I don't know if their intention is to make the whole system fall. Like, maybe that's what they want. Mm-hmm. Maybe they want to watch the system burn. But there's not, like, the problem isn't that you want everyone to have equal rights. That's a given. That's in our Charter of Rights in Canada. Everybody has equal rights. It doesn't matter if you're trans, gay, white, black, Muslim, you have equal rights. So all these special laws that give specialized groups even more power that's what he's doing. That's really weird, that you don't need that if you have a Charter of Rights and everybody has equal rights under the law.
Right.
Writing all this stuff is it's kind of, it's questionable, and I think Canadians are noticing, because right now they've deemed what they did with the truckers, basically arresting truckers. If I donated money to the trucker fund, they would have shut my account down. That they've deemed that illegal. A court has, so they're being questioned about that. So there are people who are fighting back big time in Canada and have seen it, and the world saw it. The world saw what the truckers were. I had friends in Ottawa. There's bouncy castles, and there's they made them like they were a whole bunch of swastika carrying Nazis running around, and it's a blatant lie. They're just hardworking middle class Canadians protesting so they can actually walk around without a mask, and they don't have to be forced to get a vaccination.
Yeah. Well, I am encouraged. I think we're living in some of the most important times in our history. I think that everything, the turmoil that we're experiencing, probably needed to happen. We needed to experience some growing pains, so maybe we put on our big boy pants and be a little bit more responsible as humans, But I think we're definitely going to come out of everything on the better side. We may have some rough bumpy roads ahead, but I think we can, as a majority, if we come together and we keep kind of going through this awakening, that we can come out a little better. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I think it's going to depend on what is the global agenda, and is it sustainable? Will it work? It may fall all apart. I don't know. And how is it that we play a part in making it stronger or making it fall apart? I don't know those answers necessarily. Like, I know there is an agenda. I know there is their 2030 plans, and I know China, Mao, whatever, not Mao, but Xi Jinping there, he's got a big plan of dominance, and he's China's trying to become independent so they can basically declare war, and they're trying to become independent for the same reason that, like, so they don't have sanctions. When they go on after Taiwan, they go after these places, nobody can sanction them. But I also find, like, everything that just happened in the past 2 years is so insane. This pandemic, the riots, and all this crazy stuff that happened in America, brick throwing, Antifa, there's a bazillion, all the trials and cases in January 6th, and then you've got Ukraine. I think that's way too much coincidence. Oh. Like the fact that that's all just wasn't in the plan, and then pulling out of Afghanistan, and then getting involved in Ukraine, and I think it's really weird. So I don't know.
Yeah, the
maybe
world
it
is
is
a
cause and
stage.
effect, but it feels like a couple of decades just happened in 2 years.
You're right.
You know.
Yeah, there is a definite quickening, and you know what? I'm just gonna buckle up and be along for the ride and enjoy it. That's the only thing I can
what
do.
else can you do, man?
Right.
What else can you do?
Yeah,
Like you can't. Well, if it's in play, you can't stop it
right.
as one person.
I guess
like a lot of people get upset and they get themselves into a tizzy and they do stupid things about it, and I'm like, you're not. If it's in play, if the ball's rolling down the hill, you gotta let it roll until it smashes.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm an infinite soul. I came here to party, so let's do it.
Yeah, it's got too much momentum, and who knows? Maybe it work out. Maybe electric will be a good thing, and it will be cheaper in 10 years, and we'll all be happy. Or maybe it won't. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not psychic.
Well, I think we're definitely here during some fantastic times, some terrifying times, but times that I think are very important too and necessary. So it's all good in my eyes. Melissa, thank you so much. This was fantastic. We're going to have to do this again for sure. Before you head out, let everyone know what you're doing with your podcast, what they're about, and where they can find them.
Okay, well, we have a Facebook group. It's the Folklore Dark, so join there because that's the place where I'll post everything that's happening. There's a YouTube channel. And if you go to the website, folkloredark.com, all our links are there. I'm releasing an episode on UFO cults today with Dean Bertram. I'm going to be having another one about a vampire book coming out in the next week or so. So it's great. And one of the reasons I started Folklore Dark was because of all the chaos we're going through. I thought, you know what? I don't want to focus on politics necessarily anymore. Let's just share some stories and get some interesting content that gets us out of this kind of paranoid place we've been for the past 2 years. So folkloredark.com, all the links are there, and check us out on Facebook group because that's where I do most of the interaction right now.
Perfect. Melissa, thank you so much. I had a great time, and like I said, we'll definitely have to do this again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Till next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll be talking again Monday. We'll see you then.